Hey, you've summoned a lesser maker. Last week, I started re-renovating this Mordheim board. I had a couple problems. It was too flat, so we're gonna be changing this up with adding a lot of elevation. After sketching a few ideas, I landed on a giant tavern being the centerpiece of this board. So after designing a template, 3D printing some windows, both of which you can find on the Patreon for free, link in the description, I built a portion of the tavern and painted it fully to get a better idea of what I was looking at. Now that we're all caught up with this build, we're gonna continue add on to this tavern and make it even better. I'm gonna start off by whiting out the foundation here to make room for any additions that we're gonna be making here. And I did that with a handsaw, and it makes a pretty good flush cut. After that, I'm getting everything that's already built in place, and I'm gonna start tracing out its spot in this section, and we're gonna make some additions before I glue everything down, just to see the general shape. This opposing wall is the same height as the one across it. It's a bit of a different shape, and this is all gonna be brickwork. I have a new way of doing brickwork, and I've been really enjoying it. I've taken bristles out of an old paintbrush, and I've crimped the soft metal end to a brick shape. Then I could just punch in all the bricks, and it goes relatively fast, and it leaves a really good texture. Either before or after you punch the bricks, you can rub a rock across of it, and that kind of gives it a bit of variation. I knew I wanted to incorporate a tower inside this tavern. I wasn't quite sure where it was going to be placed. So as I was doing this, I was just it gave me time to think about the process and like where to put it. I'll show you where I decide on that later. In the last video, I go really in depth into the design process that I go through when planning builds like this. So if you're interested in like what goes into this, go check that out. And I think it's a pretty good watch. If you have any questions about anything that you feel like I might have brushed over, feel free to ask it in the comments, because I answer every single comment. And sometimes it's hard to know what gets lost in translation. While you're down there, feel free to leave any comment, because leaving a like and a comment does a huge difference on how a video performs on YouTube. So I would really appreciate that. Before gluing anything down, you want to make sure that you texture anything that will be out of reach. This building has a walking bridge that will be covering a lot of sections, and trust me, I know from experience, that's a mistake you don't want to make. I textured the retaining walls for this foundation with a texture roller, and I glued those down with hot glue. After that, I glued down the other pieces and made sure to fill any gaps that were kind of making leveling issues with hot glue as well, and made sure it was really nice and cool before moving on to the next steps, so that everything was really solid. I glued in a beam bridging the two halves of the building together, and then I started placing barbecue skewers to be the foundation of this tower. The barbecue skewers are going to be a really great way of sticking this into place and building it in place, and then removing it later so I can do some fine details. Because I'm building fast to glue all this stuff together, move over to super glue gel and accelerator, and you can see I'm pulling this out, and you'll see how handy this is later when I'm doing all that fine detailing. I got this sketch from Bash and Egg on Instagram. I'm going to be following their sketch from here on out. To make the spire on the top of this roof, I grabbed a dollar store star and I cut out all 5 sides, glued one side to the middle of 2 of the other sides to kind of A-frame it, and then I glued the last 2 sides of the star that I had remaining to those pieces, made a really good quick pyramid, and then I just glued it on the top of the tower. The ornate pattern that was from the laser cut, I let it show through some of the shingles, and it was a really easy detail that I think had a good effect. Now I'm gonna start building out the shape and silhouette of the roof with some cereal board. I really like this silhouette to be really punchy. These shapes are pretty common in like Tim Burton movies or Hogsmeade and Harry Potter. I don't know, I try to not be shy when it comes to stuff like this. The more exaggerated, the better. When making my buildings, I like there to be a structure hinted at so that it doesn't look like this building could fall apart at any moment. Like it's still standing for a reason, just to make it like a little more feasible why people are willing to climb all over these buildings. So these timbers are going to be sticking out. I'm not going to be covering them with shingles. Now it's finally time to get some detailing done. Most of that is going to be shingles. I like to do my shingles with self-adhesive cork. I get this from the Dollar Tree, and I have scallop scissors that I cut rows out of the cork, and then I separate each scallop with just a cut of the scissors. And I wanted to try some shingled siding for just a different texture. Usually I let the self-adhesive backing do most of the work, but because I had to glue individual shingles here to like work around their window and stuff, I use super glue to kind of tack it in place. At the dollar store you can get plastic animal like toy sets. I like to cut off the heads of those and use them as like gargoyles or architectural features. These ones are goats, and I just glued these on here, and I had to kind of trim the horns to make sure that the railing fit behind him. This has been a really nice detail that kind of distracts from any of the messiness. As I finish the rest of these shingles, I'd like to thank my $2 a month patrons: Leroy, Fetter, Caracal, Old School FRP, Burning Heart Custom Creations, James, Anders, Hanover, Grim Drunk, Treborius, Andy, Corey, Mike, Nick, The Lich's Laboratory, Cabu, Pressimus, Seb, Lori, Nunu, Raph, Jonathan, Fabius Soroso, Dune, Chupacabra, Sinister Grackle, Silver, Fishjin, and C.J. I really appreciate your guys' support. It makes funding these videos a whole lot easier. So thank you for that. If you haven't tried this shingling method out yet, I really recommend it. It only took me like maybe 45 minutes to get all this shingled. It's really fast. And man, was I really glad that I made this thing removable so I could do all the detailing at my desk instead of leaning over the board. The last step to this whole thing was I wanted to make a weather vane, just like the sketch Bash and Egg gave me. I got 2 skulls from the Citadel skull set, and I just put them together to kind of make the similar shape, and I sculpted it together with some green stuff. If you don't have a Citadel skull set, I made an STL you could print out, and that will be free on the Patreon, of course. In fact, everything on Patreon is free, if you didn't know. It's just my way of helping you do your hobby, and if you find value in it, you can become a $2 a month patron. I sealed everything in with a black Mod Podge coat, and that glued down all the shingles and really stiffened up the pink XPS foam. After that, I started painting the stonework with a really pale brown, I guess a tan is another word for that. And I splotched it around really wet so that it would kind of drip places. The next paint color I used was like a brick orange color, kind of leaning towards that brown side. And I splotched that around places and then dry brushed everything with like a brownish gray. I've noticed that in some reference photos that the limestone tends to be a little more brown, and then the wood, especially the old wood, tends to be a little more gray, and it kind of is the opposite of what you would assume colors would be, but it ends up looking really good in the final paint job. And I think it's slightly more realistic. Of course, I paint my shingles green, as always, to follow that HOA code that I set back 2 years ago. And basically that's it. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like and comment because that really helps a video perform really well. And if this video hasn't earned your subscription, go check out the backlog. I have a whole lot of videos that you guys can binge watch, and they're all Mordheim related. Especially, I would check out the Mordheim Catacombs board. That is kind of my favorite project of all time now. And we might be revisiting that a little pretty soon in the next couple weeks. I'm not tearing it apart, I promise. All right, have a good one.